So, without having doing math on your specific question, sort of the concept of the redevelopment agency is debt. There's a period, the agency can only receive tax increment to the amount of debt that they've accrued, and so that's where it's conceivably possible that although, and you may recall that when we were talking about this in a workshop a couple of months ago, when you create the agency, you establish a baseline on tax increment. Well, that's your baseline. Any assessed valuation increase over that baseline is basically the where you derive your tax increment from. It's 1% of the increased assessed valuation. And if an agency does not have enough debt, they're not entitled to receive that additional, the full amount of tax increment that they could theoretically receive. So the agency has a period to where they're actively encouraged and supposed to incur debt. That period shuts down after several decades. I believe it's 20 years. And then you need to start paying down your debt. But until that point, the whole point of the redevelopment agency, it sort of flies in the face of everything else that we try to do in a fiscally responsible manner, but we're trying to leverage debt. Does that answer your question?
Well, maybe partially, but when you add the debt service and your administration these years, you're talking in some years 400, almost approaching $500,000. I mean, that just seems a lot of money, which is actually tax dollars that goes for nothing. I mean, to administer and to debt service, and I understand the concept of what, how it gives you the ability to borrow more money, but
I think that to an extent what you're addressing is just sort of a flaw with borrowing in general. The advantage of the redevelopment agency is it provides local control of those funds. But the fact of the matter is we are spending money that we don't currently have. So we are going to have debt service obligations.
Can you, along with that, in 2008 and 9, the administration's $123,000 figure, and then very next year, administration's $183,000 figure. How does that jump 50 grand in 1 year?
And could you tell me which page you're on?
6 and 7. I mean, is the cost of administration that much more between this year or this next fiscal year and the following one? It's going to be a $50,000 jump in administrative costs?
Unfortunately, I can't address that specific question at this time.
Supervisor Pinches, if I might interject, that it is a 5-year and it is a plan, and in some years it is more staff intensive in the work that needs to be done to another year. To answer your original question, we had targeted, based on what we had the ability to borrow, a number of around $4.5 million is what we would be borrowing. That would be an item that would come before the Board of Supervisors. We've delayed that process a little bit because of the fact that it's obviously not a good time to go out and solicit bond money in the current market. But our goal would be at some time in the next several months, as the economy improves, we'll come back to you with an entire package giving you an amount that we think we can borrow against, which our initial number was $4.5 million, and then then we'll ask the board to gauge in which specific projects that we should be moving forward to. But this is a plan for the next 5 years, and it is just a visionary plan of what we can accomplish.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, under the capital improvements projects, if you look at the list there, except for the first one, which was, I think, $150,000 put into the North State Street project, which that was a project, and that's fine. But when you go on down the second one, educate the community on redevelopment tools and develop a request for proposal and explore opportunities and work with the county water agency and develop a 5-year redevelopment plan with assistance from outside consultants, all those 5 bullet points there, that gives me the hint of sounding like we're going to hire consultants, and really has nothing to do with a capital improvement project.
Some of that is intended toward the current work that's going on in developing the 5-year plan. We've now done that. So at this point, our consultant work with developing the 5-year plan ends. The next time you would engage a consultant would have to be when you went through with bond counsel in order to solicit an offering to the public.
You know, none of these areas are in my district, Mr. Chairman, so I'd like to hear from the supervisors in those affected areas, because it's really a reallocation of tax dollars. You know, redevelopment dollars is really in itself, those are tax dollars that normally in a normal taxing process would go to your sheriff and jail and roads department and all that. So to redirect this, you know, I'd like to hear from the district supervisors in those areas, because I don't know, those issues, they don't look like, to me, I mean, the whole idea of redevelopment is to take blighted areas and help with your infrastructure to make them better communities. And I'm not necessarily convinced that all these issues actually do that. They're not, in my definition, of what a redevelopment agency can be, in the high cost of administration and debt service and everything. But it's not, you know, it affects me and it affects the people as a county, but I'd like to hear from the supervisors that this more directly affects in those areas.
One clarifying point before you ask that question, Supervisor, is you cannot take the money that currently is going into the RDA and reallocate it toward safety, law enforcement, and other areas. It's